I talk about the empty tomb because Tabor says there were two graves, and everybody's got a version on this. Of course, Bajan says he didn't die at all, so he escaped and went down to Egypt and then over to France. And I'm just saying, talk about the actual data in the New Testament that shows he was buried.
Yeah, and Craig's done a lot of things on this too, on the burial, but I recently counted virtually everything in print on the resurrection, French, German, English. And what came out of this is 23 different arguments for the empty tomb cited by recent New Testament scholarship. This is an amazing number of arguments. By far the most common one is that women report this. And the idea is, if you're going to make up a story in the first century, and by the way, it's not true what you often hear, women could not testify. They could testify, but oftentimes there's an inverse relationship between how important the data are and whether you use women. The more important it is, you don't use women. Now, if you're making up a story, you don't use witnesses on this important fact where the audience is going to say, used women. Why does each of the Gospels cite women? Because women were the ones that went to the tomb. Now that has impressed a generation of scholars. But you also have what I call Jerusalem factor. If you're going to make Jesus raised from the dead, put the tomb in Turkey. Put it somewhere else. Not in the city where the church is born, where a Sunday stroll could determine whether the grave is open or closed. You also have enemy attestation. You also have multiple attestation on the empty tomb. They do, contrary to a few New Testament scholars, the New Testament empty tomb texts are not dependent on Mark. We have 3 or 4 independent attestations here to the empty tomb. This is heavy stuff. And you know, one of the favorite comebacks of the critics, some of the more further left critics, I'll say, well, hey, your own source tells you that they didn't preach the gospel for 50 days. Come on. After 50 days, you would not recognize the body. I say, wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. This is a moot point. The Gospels did not proclaim, we have a tomb with an unidentifiable body. And since it's unidentifiable, it's not Jesus. No, their claim only works if there's no body in the tomb. And anybody could, confirm that with a Sunday afternoon stroll in Jerusalem. So don't put it in Jerusalem and don't use women. The exact 2 rules they disagree with, plus multiple attestation plus enemy. We're on the road to a good factor. And by the way, the vast majority of New Testament scholars, about 75%, if you count them, about 75% concede the empty tomb.